Alright, what's going on everybody? Welcome back to another video here on the channel, and today we are going to be talking about Jake Paul and his recent spat with the UFC, which has since gone viral on social media. This has been kind of, I guess, like a long-building feud, primarily between some of the UFC fighters, Dana White and Jake Paul. If you guys don't know, Jake Paul has, I guess, sort of made a name for himself in the fighting world as a boxer, along with Logan Paul, his brother. And he's been kind of chirping about fighting some of the guys over at UFC and whatnot, and Dana White has been going back and forth with Jake Paul about all this for a while now as well. As of right now, it doesn't really look like there's going to be any kind of conclusion that involves Jake Paul fighting anyone from the UFC in like, I guess, an MMA combat style or anything like that. I don't see Jake Paul really joining the UFC or any of this. But there's kind of a little bit of a feud going on social media that I thought was pretty funny, and I kind of wanted to talk about because, you know, everyone's kind of, I guess, talking about this on one side or the other, right? You got a lot of people saying that Jake Paul actually finally took a W. And then you have primarily UFC fans and Dana White fans that are saying that Jake Paul didn't take a W and what he's saying is ridiculous and, you know, just basically making fun of him, so... As it officially stands, Jake Paul has a record in boxing. He has 5 wins and 0 losses. Boxing isn't like football, I guess. Like, I would think to have like a professional record in football, you'd have to like make the NFL or something. But in boxing, I think if you use like the sanctioned rules and like glove sizes and everything, and there's like a legit ref and whatever, it's actually considered like a professional fight regardless. And given the fact that Jake Paul is a YouTuber, he does still have a pro boxing record of 5-0, which is pretty impressive. A lot of people discredit it by saying, you know, he didn't really fight real fighters or anything, or he's fighting people who are washed up and out of their prime. But anyway, I guess recently the entire spat between Jake Paul and the UFC really kind of heated up again. Jake Paul put out a tweet yesterday that has since got over 100,000 likes and nearly 18,000 retweets. And essentially this is from his iPhone Notes app, but it's a couple of demands that he has for Dana White, and he calls it a quote-unquote real challenge, and essentially if these were all to be met by the specified deadline or whatever, Jake Paul agrees to retire from boxing, and also would agree to do a MMA-style UFC fight against Jorge Masvidal. If you don't know who Jorge Masvidal is, he is actually... at this point, one of the most well-known and well-respected UFC fighters that's still fighting today. Last time that I checked, he is number 6, I believe, in the welterweight rankings. I'm not completely certain about that. I haven't watched UFC at least in a few weeks at this point, but that's the last time that I saw anything about it. I saw his Wikipedia a few weeks ago reading up about it, and that's what it said. I'm not sure if that's changed. He's actually been a professional fighter for a very long time. I mean, this guy's been, I guess, fighting for like, I don't know, 20, 25 years or something like that. He has a very long career. He has, like 50 or so fights under his belt, 55, 60 fights or something like that. But the guy is actually a beast. I mean, he even holds the record for the fastest knockout in the history of UFC. I think he knocked someone out in like 5 or 6 seconds. Honestly, a very impressive fighter, and just to throw my personal opinion in there, if he fought Jorge Masvidal in an MMA fight, I really think that Jake Paul probably would get his ass kicked. I mean, MMA is a completely different beast than boxing. I mean, there's technique to both of them, there's like guidelines to both of them that you need to follow to win. But man, UFC, it can really get nasty, man. Like, there's a big difference, I feel like, between, you know, taking a hook to the chin and someone picking you up and fucking slamming you on your back and, you know, choking you out or kicking you in the ribs. The shit that happens in UFC, it can get brutal sometimes, man. A little bit more brutal than boxing. Actually, honestly, that's why I prefer UFC to boxing, but... anyway, he had a list of demands. We're going to go ahead and go through those right now and talk about those, and then we will be talking about Dana White's response to this entire thing, or I really should say the lack of response to this entire thing. So, number 1, increase the minimum fighter pay per fight to $50,000. Right now it is $12,000. Number 2, guarantee UFC fighters 50% of UFC's annual revenues, which was $1 billion in 2021. Number 3, provide long-term healthcare to all fighters. You previously said brain damage is part of the gig. Imagine if NFL said that. There are many UFC alums who have publicly said they are suffering from brain damage. You have 5 days to accept and to implement the above by March 31st, 2022. Once implemented, I will immediately retire from boxing, enter USADA, and agree to a 1-fight deal with UFC to fight Weak Chin Jorge. To all UFC fighters, take time to take a stand and create value for yourselves and your peers. You deserve higher pay, you deserve long-term health care, and above all, you deserve freedom. Support each other. I am not your enemy. I am your advocate who selfishly wants to KO a few of you to make some big bank. All right, so let's go ahead and talk about this. So right now, I'm going to go ahead and just say this, at least the two leagues that I looked up here, the revenue share in the NFL is around 48%, meaning that in the largest professional American football league in the world, the players take 48% of all of the revenue. In the NBA, the largest basketball league in the world, it is about 50%, but in the UFC, it is around 16 to 18%. And I mean, when your league is a billion-dollar industry and you constantly say that, you know, you're one of the big dogs and you're one of the big leagues or whatever, it really is very pitiful to only be sharing 18 or so % of your revenue with the people who provide your product. It's not really a perfect example by any stretch of the imagination, but just to show really how unfair this revenue split actually is. YouTubers who are like partnered and get ads and stuff on their YouTube channel take 55% of the revenue. So for all of the ad revenue I generate for YouTube, I get 55% of that. So I get the majority of the money that I make. I can't really imagine being like a high tier professional league of any sort, like being the upper echelon of what you do, and you find it acceptable to pay less than 1/5 of all the revenue to the people who provide your product. And this is a blood sport league. I mean, people do suffer brain damage. Like I said, you know, you can get kicked in the head at any given time in UFC and be fucked up, right? Like, MMA is serious. It's not play fighting. It's not fucking WWE or any of that. I mean, you've seen people get brutal, gruesome injuries inside the octagon, and it happens. And people say things like, oh, well, you know, you signed up for that when you decided to do it or whatever. But, you know, it's funny you never really hear that argument used against, like, normal, quote-unquote, jobs that are dangerous. Like, you'll see people say, like, oh, UFC fighters, you know, they sign up for it, man. If they only get 18%, that's on them, bro. Why do they deserve long-form healthcare and shit like that from the UFC, even though it's literally risking their health and life and safety and everything? But you would never hear anyone make that argument about any of these other jobs, you know? You'd never hear an argument about a guy who climbs 300 feet up tall-ass trees to cut limbs and stuff. You'd never hear anyone say, like, oh, that guy doesn't deserve healthcare because that's what he wants to do. You'd never hear someone say, like, oh, firefighters don't deserve fucking long-form healthcare because, you know, they chose to be a firefighter. They chose to go through all that training. So it blows my mind that just because these people are performing in sports and they're entertainers or whatever, that people actually have the opinion that these people don't deserve long-form healthcare. My opinion is, if you risk your body and you risk your safety and shit for the benefit of a company, they should provide you with the adequate healthcare to take care of you. I don't think that should really be a very controversial point, you know? It's kind of insane. I will say, I don't know about guaranteeing them 50% of the revenue. I mean, it should definitely be higher than 18%, but, I mean, 50%, I don't think it's ever going to get to that point. Unless UFC fighters unionize like the NFLPA did and the NBA and all these players' associations for other leagues have, then it's never really probably ever going to get raised in the first place unless there's enough public backlash, but, you know, I don't ever see it getting to 50% without that. So a lot of people say that Jake Paul took the W here because he made these demands or whatever and he was fighting for these people. You got to remember also, UFC fighters, most of the time, they only fight like 1, 2, maybe 3 times a year. So if you're making $12,000 a fight and you fight twice a year, you're not even making $25,000 working as a fighter for a billion-dollar industry. I mean, I feel like that's kind of insane, right? $25,000 to be a UFC fighter doesn't really sound the best to me. So Dana White, he kind of responded. He kind of put out a video more or less clowning Jake Paul for the most part, but I still want to show it because it is technically his response.
Jake, you never responded to the challenge. You publicly stated that I use cocaine. I do not. So I told you, you could randomly cocaine test me for the next 10 years. I believe that you're a cheater, and I believe that you use steroids. So I want to randomly steroid test you for the next 2 years. And that thing that you came out with today, nobody on earth thinks that you really wrote that. You're too stupid. And for those of you that don't know, if you've ever watched one of his fights and you see when they do the stare down, the guy that's standing in the middle with the warlock nose and the big warlock wart on his face, apparently that's his manager. And that guy used to be an accountant for me. And let's just say this, he no longer works for me, and I think he's a scumbag. But if you two think that you can do it better than we do, we're doing this whole thing wrong, you could treat the fighters better than we do, knock yourself out. Go start your own business. It's easy to do. Go get the warlock on it. The Warlock can get it started for you. What you and the Warlock should be focused on is your business. You're tanking. You can't sell pay-per-views. You're calling out Jorge Masvidal because he's a pay-per-view superstar. Nate Diaz, Conor McGregor, Mike Tyson. These are all superstars. You're not. You can't sell pay-per-views. So you do whatever the hell you want to do. I'm ready to roll, buddy. I don't use cocaine. Do you use steroids? Let's do this, Jake.
All right, now this response from Dana White I feel like is mostly just a cop-out. Now, I will say, Jake Paul accused him of using cocaine and whatnot, and Dana White has publicly denied that, obviously, as you can see in the video. I honestly think it's a pretty fair challenge between the two. I mean, Jake Paul, if he has nothing to hide, sure, go ahead and take a steroid test, and Dana White take a coke test. I mean, I don't understand why this is the tit-for-tat that they've really kind of settled on here, because I feel like there's a lot more important things that could be talked about between these two, but I really just kind of feel like bringing up his manager and everything was more or less just a big cop-out from Dana White, right? Like, he was just kind of, I guess, trying to change the topic away from the demands that were apparently made from Jake Paul or his team, whatever it may be, who really knows. Dana White constantly kind of has this response when people ever suggest him, like, paying the fighters more and, like, actually treating it like it's one of the other premier sports leagues in America or realistically the world. And he always basically goes, well, if you don't like what we're doing, start your own business, which it's a cop-out response. It's what it is. It's a way for him to deflect having to actually address the points head on. If he says, well, go start your own business, he doesn't have to address the fact that, other premier sports leagues pay 50% of the revenue to the players. And that, sports leagues like the NFL, where there's violent contact sport and whatnot, couldn't literally get away legally with not having long-form healthcare plans for their teams and whatnot. So I really don't like the fact, as a UFC fan, that Dana White constantly responds to these points in this way. I mean, if there really is some sort of business reason why you can't do this, come out and prove it, man. I mean, you run the fucking UFC, come show, Don't tell me, show me. If it really is impossible financially for this league to be paying their players and whatnot, how the elite organizations elsewhere pay their players, go ahead and show me some fucking, financial documents or something. Explain this point to me, because I really do wonder how every other sports league has figured it out, but the UFC hasn't, right? And this is always the response that we get. I'm not a big fan of that, but Jake Paul ended up responding to what Dana White said in this video with his own follow-up video, or I should say videos on Twitter. So
Jake, you never responded to the challenge.
Dana, I accepted every part of your challenge. I said I would fight Masvidal in MMA. Steroid test me whenever the fuck you want. It is 2 weeks after my fight, and I am a fat bitch. I don't do steroids, and I take it as a compliment because there's no other excuse to me knocking out all of your champions than this kid does steroids. Look at me. Look at that. A fat bitch. If you steroid test me, then I want to steroid test every one of your fighters. Ooh, you want to do it though, will you?
I use cocaine.
I'm in St. Bart's, one of the nicest beaches in the world. You're ruining my vacation. We were on a yacht party last night, Meek Mill, Drake, everybody, Mike Tyson going crazy. You have been caught with cocaine and hookers every other week.
I use cocaine.
And you think that, like, with all the money that you have, like billionaire or some shit, that you would get some fucking Botox, because your forehead looks like a motherfucking GPS Google map, like all the lines in it and shit.
I use cocaine.
And you say Masvidal is a pay-per-view superstar. Let's go to his last Instagram post. 5,000 likes or 10,000 likes or some shit. Do you realize that my mom, Pam, gets more likes than your pay-per-view superstars? Men lie, women lie, Dana White lies, numbers don't. You want to talk shit about my manager, who is the CFO of your company that helped you sell it to Endeavor, $4 billion?
Guy that's standing in the middle, apparently that's his manager. And that guy used to be an accountant for me.
You're just a jealous, ugly fuck. You don't know what true happiness is. You're the definition of a fucking unhappy billionaire who thought that money was gonna make their lives better. Feel bad for you.
I use cocaine.
Long story short, you addressed nothing that I said. I accepted your challenge. I said I would fight MMA. I said that I would retire from boxing, and you avoided all of that shit. Hold on. Also, instant replay, there was a fucking UFO in the back of this video. Side note, but like fucking Joe Rogan, aliens, we're all fucked. It shows that you are in a corner. You're a dog in a corner trying to fight to save his whole company and the embarrassment that I've put you through. everybody sees it. And what you can't accept or love or appreciate is that I'm trying to change the sport forever. And you are one of the most selfish capitalistic motherfuckers that I've ever seen. And everybody else needs you, Dana. I'm the only person that doesn't need you. And I don't give a fuck about you. But all these people, all your fighters, all of them, they can't say shit because you'll just bench them. You met your maker. I'm not going to stop. Welcome to the show, ladies and gentlemen.
I use cocaine.
The bottom line, Dana, is that you won't add healthcare for your fighters because you don't give a fuck about them. And you're too much of a greedy bitch to pay your minimum fighter more than $12,000 for risking their lives, which is what a janitor makes. You need to pay them $50,000, Dana. Stop avoiding my points.
Obviously, it's a very ridiculous tit for tat between the both of them here at this point. Obviously, no one really expects Jake Paul to be, I would say, the beacon of maturity. I mean, I don't think anyone ever made that argument, but even at the end of the day, man, like, what's really happening here, I don't know. My hypothesis is they're just trying to sell fights, man. Like, that's really my hypothesis. I mean, Jake Paul made some great points, I feel like, about the UFC here. I do think he took a W in that sense, but I feel like all this clown posting between the both of the two, it really serves no purpose other than to sell fights. I mean, Jake Paul, regardless of who he fights next, whether or not it's Jorge Masvidal in an MMA setting or whatnot, it is going to sell. I feel like that's kind of a weak point. Jake Paul is going to sell fights. He has sold fights. They've done very well. He's made a lot of money doing it. And obviously, whatever they're doing here works because I want to see Jake Paul and Jorge face off in MMA. I want to see what happens because either way, I'm not going to be disappointed. I mean, either Jake Paul's going to step in there and he's going to fuck Jorge Masvidal up and it's going to shake the entire fighting world when that happens. Especially if it happens in an MMA setting and some fucking YouTube vlogger, it's everyday bro, comes in and drops one of the best UFC fighters. Or Jorge Masvidal is going to make a complete blood sport of him, is going to completely fucking throw him across the octagon and borderline fucking kill him. And it's going to be a great show. So either way, man, I want to see it happen. I want to see these guys in the octagon. I want to see what Jake Paul can do in an MMA setting. Fuck the talking, guys. Dana White, do your coke test. Jake Paul, man, do your fucking steroid test, have the meetup, do whatever it takes, man, I don't care. Let's get the product rolling. I know a lot of people don't care, but dude, it's just fun to watch, honestly. But with that being said, though, thank you guys for watching. If you did enjoy, make sure to leave a like. Subscribe if you're brand new around here on the channel. Follow me over on Twitter and Twitch at @SubToOptimus. Make sure to check out Shop Opti down below. And until my next video, guys, this is Optimus Well, talking about Jake Paul and Dana White, and signing out.